Hi there, this is Alexander Hall for Viva Voce, week 1 of our FMP project. So, I'm going to go on and tell you that this is going to be our Viva Voce from April to May of 2018. So, hope you enjoy these Vivas from me. So, firstly, question 1. What have I done this week in our project sessions? So, firstly, what we had to do was we had to watch this documentary on ABC News, which was like a court case that was made back in 2015 of this girl in Alabama called Savannah, who was apparently raped by the high school football star Cameron Harrison. And so what happened was to her was she went out to a party down somewhere near to the high school for one of her friend's birthday. And so what happened was she got really, really drunk. There was a lot of booze there. The booze was coming in all over the place, and then she just got drunk, had a hangover, didn't know what she was doing at that point. And then, she was taken upstairs to lie down, try and overcome the whole thing. And then apparently there was that talk of Cameron just going up and raping her while making the advantage count because she had no idea what she was doing at that point. So that was one of the main ones that we looked over. Another thing that I wanted to look over, the other thing that we did was the audition process. So, firstly, what we did after we looked at the documentary was we had to audition with duologues. So one of the things that I had to do was I had to be partnered up with a girl called, I was partnered up with Abby Lodge, who I then had to do like a duologue of the Savannah and Cameron, but we've had to change the names because we're making it into like a British version, not an American version, just for the rights of it, probably. But yeah, so the Cameron's called Jake, who was me for that, and Abby was playing Lola, which is the Savannah in that case. So what we had to do was we were given like a duologue script, and what we had to do in the time that we had was just familiarise ourselves with the whole script, and also try and learn it if we can. Just learn it if we possibly can, if we could do it, but most of all just familiarise ourselves with it, which is more important. And just, yeah, and everyone else, a lot of the other duos that were in the group had to rehearse the same duologue. So pretty much everyone else was doing exactly the same as us. And so Gary, our director, had to look at each one and just like look over different comparisons. So for example, me and Abby, once they had a look at our one, they had to then take us out, and then other people had to go in, do their one, and then after the agreed pairs had done theirs, then he kind of mixed it up a little bit by getting one of the boys to go with one of the other girls who was in another part, who did a different pair, so they were all balancing out. And then the other one that we did was combination audition. So it was more like a dialogue. So we did like a dialogue audition as well, which I did as well, which was where you had, like, for example, so you had Jake and all his friends all at once doing like their full dialogue. So there were people like Jake, Patrick, Sam, and Greg, and Aaron. And yeah, so what happened at that point was we had to get all the 5 all together and then mix different characters up and tell them to do each line, and just get into it and familiarise ourselves with it, or even learn it. The same process as before with the duologue. So just compare each character and see which one fits best. Another thing that we did over the week was hot seating. So, as we can say from the ABC News, they interviewed people like Savannah's friends, Cameron's friends. Cameron wasn't ever in one because, I think he was just a bit too humiliated to do it. So what I was then done with this audition process was I was given like a particular character. So, for example, one of my characters there was the person who was the owner of the house where the party happened, and I had to play him as if he had nothing to do with the rape, with the apparent rape, and thinks that all of it is just done for attention seeking by all the other students, and thinks that they're just doing it so they can get the media to attract the media into it, and just to try and get themselves heard by the public. So that was one of the hot seatings that I did. And then, of course, there was me playing Cameron's best friend, who would act just innocent against Cameron, thinks that's unlike Cameron to act, for that sake, Jake. Sorry, but yeah, so having to play Jake's best friend and act like he never did anything like that, so it was unlike him to do a rape. And then just work around each one as best as I could. And yeah, that was what we did this week. Question 2. What research have I undertaken independently this week? So, the one bit of research that I had to do was research the definition for tribalism, and how the meaning of tribalism is like someone who is like the main authoritative person in the whole group. So, for example, you could say Jake was the most higher ranked person in the whole boy group. With the girls, Lola would be the higher ranked girl in the whole girl group. So the reason for that is because of the experience they're going through, and also the tough stage that they're going through. And everyone's paying more attention to them than they would for any of the other boys, because the boys weren't involved as much as the other ones. So that's why, for example, when you look at the ABC News, they're interviewing more of Savannah than they are interviewing all the other people, because they're not given any particular accusation apart from being given questions. What do you remember from this? What do you remember from that? So it's just working on just looking at the people who everyone would pay more attention to. So if you look at different characters that you'd look at on a stage production or on a screen production, which one would really you'd pick out the most? So it's the ones who are the most tribalist characters. So the one example I can give would be someone like Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that he got more of the attention and more of the tribalist look than all the other boys in the Chocolate Factory. And of course, Willy Wonka was the one who was also a bit of a tribalist, because he was the creator of the Chocolate Factory. So that's an example that I could give to you there. More research I did was look more deeply into the documentary that I watched when we started the project. So really try and look really into it consciously, really as consciously as I could, just to understand the whole process of what happened with the whole rumours being spread, and making sure that it was clear what happened and why it happened, and just seeing all the different reactions that were taken by the different people that are closely related to Savannah and Cameron. And also the other bit of research I've done is comparing screen acting and stage acting, so looking at the different combinations you'd use. So one of the ones that I did use, so one of the absolute three main examples that I can give of the combinations of screen acting and stage acting would be the use of facial expression and hand gesture. So the first thing I can tell you is with the stage. With stage is when you come to using facial expressions, you have to be really careful at not being too. You have to be really careful about trying to really take your emotion as much as you can and really create a bigger scene out of it, because you want to make sure that people can see it clearly, and you can't use the use of tears in it. You have to just kind of adapt to being really theatrical, because with a theatre, there's no way that audiences can sleek straight into the actor's face just to see what they're actually trying to portray to them. So if you get, for example, a big theatre like in the West End, you get those who sit right at the front because they can afford it, and then you get those at the back who probably don't want to pay as much money as the others. And, the ones who are right at the back don't get as much of a good angle to see from. So yeah, you got to really look at those different combinations there, and also the use of hand gestures as well. So, yeah. But however, with screen acting, because in a cinema or either on a TV screen, you can get angles from all sides of the table. So if someone's really sad, they can get tearful if they want to when they're being filmed, because they can get a close glimpse at your face, looking at the tears rolling through your eyes, so everyone knows what's actually going through your head at that point. So yeah, that's another really important one, and you can be a lot more natural. So there's a lot more naturalistic about you that you can use in screen acting, which is why you've got to be really careful about not being too theatrical on screen, because it can be seen as really embarrassing and awkward for the screen director. Because if you show a bit too much theatricality on screen, it can really ruin the whole meaning of screen acting. So you've got to be very careful. And as they say, less is more, and less is more really does apply to the difference between screen acting and stage acting when it comes to expressing yourself. The next one that I've got is the volume and your voice. So with theatre, everyone is reliant on you having a good projective voice. So you've got to make sure that your voice is healthy. So making sure that your voice is healthy, making sure that your voice is really clear. So making sure that your voice is not just heard from a small angle, but your voice can be heard all the way to the back. So that's why that's why you have to make sure that your voice is as clear and that it's as projective as possible, and that you always support with the diaphragm as well. And also the reason also you have to, and also they expect you to learn your lines or learn your lyrics when you're on stage, is because once you've got it in your head and you're really pulling it out like it's second nature, that you can really have a bit more projectiveness in your voice, which can really give a bit more energy to it. And because if you're just looking at a script the whole time and going, and that is how it actually happened, and then you just start to rabble on a lot, which is why volume and voice and learning a line and learning lyrics all at once is so important when it comes to theatre. So, and making sure you always breathe through the diaphragm, especially if the theatre can't afford microphones, and so you have to make sure that your voice is clear as possible. But with screen acting, the goodness about that is because it's because you're being filmed in a setting, and they've got the affordability to have microphones all over the different area of the scenery. They can do what they can and make sure that everyone can hear you, even if you've got the most quietest voice. So if you're speaking like this, that if you have to speak like this or something like that the microphone can clearly hear you and bring it into the mix, so that that when people watch you on screen, that they won't have to worry about going, sorry, I can't hear you. So it's a bit like that. It's a lot more beneficial for those who don't have the most projective voice for screen acting. And Yeah, and also the other good thing with volume and voice is that you can also, when it comes to screen acting, that also, you don't have to get your lines spot on. So you can keep going back and forward, back and forward. So if something's not as clear as you want it to be, you can just tell them, well, I want you to say this word, record it into the mic, and just make sure it's clear. So if someone was to say, close the door, and they go that way, but they say, you got to do it like this, close the door. They can just say, right, just put that into the mic and show us what you can do. So even if you forget a line, or you might not project your line as clearly on screen, they can always change it and make sure that it's as spot on as it can be. Which is the goodness about screen, is that they can always improve it if something's not as good as the other thing is. Which is another good example of studio recordings. Next one is number 3. I've already talked about this, but also this is the biggest one, is preparation and performance. So we all know when it comes to being on stage, people expect you to have a good memory on terms of how well you know your lines and how well you know your lyrics, how well you know your choreographies, whatever it is you're going to be doing on stage. They expect you to have a good memory for it, so that people can see you're just looking really confident and looking really natural in terms of how you're trying to act or how you're trying to perform. And and the biggest problem with being so, trying to remember your lines or anything else that can go wrong in theatre, stage actors have to be on their feet the whole time. So either when you're on stage and you're trying to do a scene, if someone messes a line up, you've just got to keep going and make sure that you improvise and make sure that the line just makes sense. So if someone does go wrong, that you just keep in character and make sure that you keep the whole thing consistent. Because the problem is, the chances of someone messing up a line, or there's a malfunction in terms of clothing going off, a wig going off, anything can happen, is that you just keep in character and make sure that it keeps it flowing. So a good example I can take is, I remember going to see Hairspray about a year ago, and the person who played Tracy, her wig fell off in one of the scenes, and I had no idea that was that actually happened, and they kept it acting, and they just tried to play with it like it was part of the script, which is a good example of what you should do if you're in the theatre and you're performing and something goes wrong. You just keep it flowing. You don't stop just because something's happened, and don't just start looking like you don't know what you're doing, because that's the last thing the audience want to see. They don't want to see that. They want to see the whole thing flowing even more. And yeah, that's a really big, important thing to remember. And remember, when it comes to theatre, when a mistake is made, you can't reverse time. You have to just overcome your mistake and actually carry on with the show, which is the most important thing when it comes to theatre. Making sure whatever happens, you keep the show flowing just as it goes. And you make a mistake, there's nothing you can do. It's either your own fault because you didn't practice enough. It's part of showbiz. With film, the goodness about film, I can tell you this, is that if you make a mistake on your line, if you forget a line, or clothing falls apart, anything that can happen easily in theatre, any of those mistakes can easily be overcome when it comes to filming. Because the goodness is, they can keep skipping back and doing the same scene again until it's perfect. And yeah, that's why they're a lot more relaxed when it comes to screen acting, which is either, for some, if people are very good at learning a scene very quickly, that's a good thing as well. But if you don't, and they're not expecting you to get it absolutely spot on first time, they expect you to just take it one by one, which is a good thing. And also, you know, that's the goodness about being part of preparing for a screen job, is that you can take each one as it goes. However, the difficulty is with theatre, you know, you're working a full process to learn a full show and learn a full script in a decent amount of time. With film, however, each scene has to be taken one by one, and you might get told, oh, we just need to block this scene and film it for the next day, and you might just say, oh, I don't even know it. Then they say, right, well, learn it in before you come in tomorrow. Or they might just say 2 hours, learn this part, please, and learn it. So with film, you've got to be much quicker at learning lines than it is with theatre. But it all depends on the people that you're working with, of course. Sometimes you'll get those who are very organised, very scheduled. You get those who are absolutely rubbish at keeping the whole consistency of informing their actors, informing everyone else, and sometimes it just happens out of the ordinary. But also the disadvantage of being on screen is that, you know, directors, all sorts, they hire in different landmarks that they want to use at different times, and sometimes they might not have any other choice. So before they reach their deadline to completely edit the whole series, edit a whole film, that they might just have one day to completely film one part that they want to use in that particular setting. So they have to make sure that everything is completed. So there's no stopping you. It's non-stop. You have to be non-stop working throughout the time that you've got to use that space to hire. So that's something else that to bear in mind when it comes to screen acting, is if you get given a place to film your scene, you have to make sure that it's actually reached at the particular time. So that's important as well. But yeah, so how have I applied this piece of research in class? Well, main ones I can tell you is comparing my screen and stage technique that I've just shown you. You know, we've had to use this over the last few days because, of course, with the hot seating, I've had to be filmed for that, and you know, I had to act like I was actually in an interview, so that could be used as screen acting. And then, of course, trying to block a scene and just go over a scene when it comes to doing like dialogue scenes with all the other people. So with Jake and his friends doing their part, you know, that's something that you can use for your stage technique. And the other one would be tribalism. So how we've used tribalism so far for what we've done. You could say within the interviewers on screen, you know, with examples like saying that Jake and Lola, they were the tribalists of the group. That they're the ones that you can see are the real tribalists, who are the higher ranked, which I mentioned before. What practical problems have I come across this week? So one of the ones would be adapting to screen and stage. So as they say, you know, with doing acting for stage, I'm more adaptable with stage acting because I've been given more of the training in stage than I have with screen. Screen is a lot more new to me, so I've had to adapt quite a lot to doing more screen acting, trying to get into the screen, trying to familiarise myself with the demands of screen acting and demands with stage acting. So trying to understand the importance of learning a line quicker, or trying to make sure that I improvise a lot more. So making sure that I don't be too theatrical when I'm being filmed. When it comes to screen acting, that's one of the ones that I need to think of. And a practical problem would be but also one of the things that I need to do is research screen acting and practice in my own time. So watch clips on YouTube, watch videos of people giving advice about how to perfect your screen acting technique, and then just start to adapt it and apply it and start to practice, maybe by looking in my mirror at home and starting to think about the different ways I can act compared to how I act with stage, and just work on and think if I'm actually getting the idea of it. And yeah, number 5, have we created anything new? Yes, we have. Well, the interview on screen on what happened. So when I had to give my example of when they said, right, play the person who owned the house where the party happened, and then of course Jake's best friend, who was completely against the whole rumour being spread around. That's one of the other things that that was one of the new things that we've created that could probably be part of the production. So who knows? It all depends. But yeah, and what was the audition process like, and how did I overcome it? So I felt it was really intense. It was a really intense process, but it also gave me an idea of how professional auditions could be done. So understanding that, some auditions take longer to process than others. So I've heard that some auditions take at least months to complete the process. Some take a day, some take all kinds. It could all work at different times, if you know what I mean. And then of course familiarizing myself with my lines and even trying to learn them in very small hours. So, and I'm not used to learning lines that quickly. I do learn lines in like a couple of days, probably weeks, but I've never been in the process where you've had to learn something in like an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or even in a day. I've not had that kind of practice yet to learn something that quickly, because I've always been a bit more laid back, don't work too hard. But I know that in screen acting, they're a lot more intense than how they are in stage. So, with stage, you can kind of lay back a little bit. But with screen, you're on your feet non-stop. So that's something I've had to kind of get used to. And that's how I feel that the audition process has gone. It's trying to get yourself familiar with the different demands that you could be under. How is the transition changing from stage to film? Well, with the different combinations, we've had use of interviews and trying to use our process of being cast a lot more professionally, because I thought I was going to get cast at least sometime even before this Viva. So I've had to really be patient and understand how Gary probably tries to cast differently to how other directors I've worked with have cast us with quicker succession. So it's just trying to respect that directors want to go through different audition processes compared to others. Some are more conscientious of time than others, and that's just what I've had to experience with this audition process. So yeah, that's my audition. That's my Viva Voce done for today. So yes, this is Alexander Hall saying over and out. This is Viva Voce week 1, and I bid you farewell. Bye bye.